Hey, good morning, everybody. So I'm Casey Cordes, and if no one can hear me and you see my lips moving, someone start waving your arms to let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep talking. So I am the this year's chair of ULI St. Louis. I'm on the affordable housing team at US Bank CDC, and we really this year at ULI St. Louis feel that this is the time for these kinds of conversations around planning, equity, and the future success of our region. This stuff is as relevant as it's ever been. And today we're here to talk about the Vacancy Collaborative. So our mission at ULI overall is to provide leadership in the responsible use of land and in creating and sustaining thriving communities worldwide. Within ULI St. Louis, we really try to inspire and encourage everyone to make St. Louis a better place for everyone who lives here. We would like to acknowledge that much of St. Louis is located on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Osage Nation, the Missouri and Illini Confederacy. We thank them for their hospitality and their stewardship of this land. As an organization dedicated to the responsible use of land, it's important that we remember and acknowledge this fact, as well as the importance and genius of our natural environment. As we all know, programs like this can't happen without sponsors. So especially this year, we are really grateful that all these people on the screen have stuck with us during a pandemic when budgets are tight. And so we want to give them credit for doing that. That's why we can continue to make all of these programs free, which I think is really awesome. Let's see, as you may know, so this year we've really been featuring a series of conversations around planning in the St. Louis region. We've taken off from this quote, "Start where you are," which is credited to Arthur Ashe. And this series focuses on the amazing collaborative approach that is underway to address vacancy, both within land and buildings in our city. So let me just say quickly, I know I often cite this work of this team as a really inspiring collaboration and a great example of what we all want to see more of around the region. So I think it's some really good energy to bring to your dreary Wednesday morning here. And it's an inspiring team of folks. So this is a coalition of partners dedicated to reducing the negative impact of vacant property in the city. It's supported by the Community Builders Network, but really run by a host of volunteers from the public and private sectors and by residents, all activated around a set of goals you'll hear more about today. We at ULI St. Louis have really consistently recognized the value of their work. We try to be cheerleaders. I mean, we think this is great. And we'd really like to thank them for their leadership and what y'all are doing. And in addition to sharing information with our audience today, we also would like, I think, at least I would, to kind of frame this as a call to action and think about how ULI members and others in the real estate field can continue or maybe begin to support their efforts to rebuild the city in an equitable way. So here you see some smiling faces on your screen. This is who we're going to hear from. First of all, we've got Laura Ginn, who's the vacancy strategist at the City of St. Louis, Bob Lewis, who's an assistant professor of urban planning at SLU, Cindy Whiteside, board president at SLACO, and then following up, I think, on their kind of sort of roundtable conversation or presentations will be Cecilia Dvorak, who's the city planning executive for the Planning and Urban Design Agency downtown, and she will facilitate some Q&A for us. So please, we all know the drill with Zoom. Drop your comments and thoughts in the chat, and we will try to get into some good Q&A at the end. But I think with that, I will hand it over to our panel of three, Laura, Bob, or Sundi, whoever wants to go first.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here so early. I'm going to kick us off with some context, and then Cindy and Bob will lay out kind of the structure of the collaborative a bit more, and then we'll walk through some examples of our efforts. So when we talk about vacancy, we are talking about properties that are really both vacant, unused, and abandoned, cause some burden to the city. At least 7,000 of these properties have buildings on them. And those buildings have been vacant on average 7 years. So some of them much longer, as many as decades. And according to the fire department, about 40% of fires in our city are vacant buildings. Another about 20% or 20,000, up to 20,000 lots are just vacant lots without buildings. The middle picture on the left is me standing in the middle of a vacant lot as an example of how high sometimes vegetation can get because resources are thin for maintaining these properties. And in total, there are enough vacant properties in the city to build 2 forest parks. St. Louis has the 3rd highest concentration of vacant properties in the country, but that's when you look at the city as a whole. About 19% of our parcels are vacant. But if you were to look just south of Del Mar, which you can see pretty strongly on this map, the Del Mar divide, only about 3% of parcels south of Del Mar are vacant properties. And north of Del Mar in some of our neighborhoods, that number gets as high as 60%. So in fact, if you were to look at North St. Louis as its own city, it would have the highest concentration of vacant properties in the country. Next slide, please. This concentration of vacant properties does not exist by accident or in a vacuum. So where we have high concentrations of vacancy, we also have high concentrations of poverty, of low access to transit and technology, environmental and racial health disparities, higher concentrations of crime, lower trust in government. All of these things are related. And we can argue the cause and effect of many of them. For example, vacant buildings can cause crime or crime can cause vacancy. But what we do know is that each of these issues is a result of historic and systemic racism in our city and our region. And we know that it will take a large collaborative effort to undo what's taken decades to build. Government can't do this alone, and neither can nonprofits or academia. So we really come at this issue in a comprehensive, thoughtful, and collaborative approach. Sandy?
Thank you, Laura, for laying out this daunting challenge of vacancy in St. Louis. The response to this challenge began in 2015 when SLACO declared vacancy as its #1 advocacy issue and held the first meeting of the SLACO Vacancy Committee in January 2016. At that same time, the city, under the leadership of Mayor Francis Slay, began working with the Center for Community Progress, CCP, to address the city's vacant property problem. And they created a vacancy task force and held its first meeting in April of 2016. But they disbanded shortly thereafter due to Mayor Francis Slay announcing he was not going to seek a 5th term. 3 reports specific to the vacancy effort in St. Louis were critical to our strategic planning efforts. The Parcels and Peppers paper, which is a great resource on ideas for repurposing vacant land and using tools for evaluating vacancy and vacant property. The Center for Community Progress's report on developing a shared vision and strategies to address St. Louis's vacancy problem, and with the assistance from the EPA, the Asakura Robinson St. Louis Land Bank Assessment Report. SLACO's Vacancy Committee continued its vacancy work by hosting events and workshops like Finest 15, launching initiatives like Proposition Neighborhood Stabilization, but SLACO recognized, as outlined in many of the reports on St. Louis vacancy, that there was a great need to work together. So a steering committee was formed, chaired by Dana Malkus of SLU Law, to determine how we could bring everyone together, city departments and agencies, community organizations and institutions, and neighborhood residents, all at the table working together. Next slide, please. Who we are. After 16 months of planning and securing funding to hire a coordinator, thank you, Missouri Foundation for Health, we held a launch event in July 2018 for the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative at SLU Law. Almost 200 participants provided feedback on vacancy priority issue areas, which would eventually become our working groups. Now we have over 40 organizations participating, 12 city departments, hundreds of individual volunteers, and neighborhood residents. We have 2 central committees and 6 working groups. Next slide, please. Our 6 working groups are the Anti-Displacement Working Group, focused on equitable development and preventing displacement, Our data analysis group, increasing transparency and tracking of our efforts, marketing and engagement, engaging with all of our neighborhood residents, reinvestment and reuse, coming up with ideas and financial products to help us reinvest and reuse our current land stock and building stock. Stabilization, maintenance, and demolition on maintaining, even demolishing some of our stock if necessary, and vacancy prevention working group, how to prevent a property from becoming vacant in the first place. Those are our working groups, and they are standing strong on some of the priorities that we have set. Next, Bob will explain our priorities and our work plan.
All right, thanks, Sunday. I don't know if anybody mentioned, but Sunday and I are the two co-chairs of one of those central committees, the Vacancy Advisory Committee, and all the working groups have co-chairs as well. So there's a lot of not only volunteers, but a lot of volunteer leaders working on all this. But we had to, from the variety of reports that Sunday mentioned and all of those initiatives prior to 2018, those culminated in the creation of the Vacancy Collaborative, but they cried out for a coordinating plan for us. 6 working groups had been created, 2 oversight committees, all with defined purposes. It was crucial to pull all this together into a shared mission and a set of action items that, minimize conflict and overlap while maximizing teamwork and synergy. We therefore went to work and compared and contrasted the various reports and asked all the working groups to prioritize actions that were emerging in their deliberations. The focus was, of course, long-term because vacancy will not be solved quickly, but also short-term because those long journeys start with first steps. And we decided that an 18-month strategic plan, which we call our work plan, was the necessary vehicle. We're about halfway through that plan, by the way, now. 5 guiding principles emerged as vital to the work of everyone in the work plan. Our work as a collaborative would be transparent and equitable for everyone, community residents, participants in the collaborative. We would hold vacant property owners accountable for the conditions of their properties and the eventual uses to which they would be put. All working groups and committees are committed to engaging and improving the capabilities of residents to address vacancy challenges. We're all devoted to improving and empowering not only neighborhood capacity, but also the abilities and resources of the many government agencies that address vacancy. And we're committed to helping government leaders with fresh ideas, resources, unity and purpose, and building political will for long-term sustainability in vacancy eradication. Now, as part of our engagement and transparency goals, we've been holding presentations and discussions kind of like this with a wide variety of professional associations that have interests and, very importantly, skills in reducing vacancy. Which brings us to the brief survey that many of you filled out prior to today's ULI meeting. We asked about your interests in vacancy issues, and 5 major themes emerged from the survey shown here. We're going to more directly address the top 3 here in a couple of minutes. These are about site conditions, building rehab, and neighborhoods. But we're not going to ignore the other 2. We're going to sprinkle in topics of policy and government processes and data-driven practices throughout all 3 of those presentations. Laura Ginn's going to give us a start with more information on site conditions. Laura.
Thank you, Bob. Next slide. Okay. So we know that we can't tackle this issue without a better understanding of it, a better handle on it. And data around vacant and abandoned properties is pretty tricky. So only about 40% of properties are actually publicly owned. They exist within our land bank, the Land Reutilization Authority of the City of St. Louis, which is an owner of last resort. So properties that have been foreclosed on and gone to a tax sale, if no one bids on them, they fall into that land bank. A lot of people assume that the LRA owns all of these properties, but about 60% are privately owned, and that can be any combination of individuals from out of state, people that have inherited properties but don't live here anymore, prospecting. It runs the gambit. So really getting a handle on where these properties are, who owns them, what's going on with them is pretty important. So one of the things we've worked towards is a vacant property portal. which takes data sets from more than a dozen different city departments and really asks questions of all of them. Who's boarding up these properties? When are we maintaining them or removing illegal dumping? Are the permits pulled? And tries to get us down to one universal truth of where our vacant and abandoned properties are. And then of course, not only for planning, but making sure that that information is available to everyone. So we try to put that out on the website as an interactive map and other ways. So that's still an evolving effort, the portal, and you should see another version coming out soon. Another example of making sure we share information as we can is the demo tracker. So this is also on the site, and it's an interactive web map of where publicly funded demolitions are happening across the city. And anytime you can see what is in progress, what's been completed, and even pull up who the contractor was, where the money came from. So really trying to make sure that people who are doing planning, but also neighborhood residents, are able to look and see kind of what's going on in these at all times. To the next slide, one of the tools for tackling vacant and abandoned properties is demolition. Next slide. Do we freeze? Uh-oh. Am I the only one that just lost the presentation?
No, we're all there.
No, it's
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So hopefully,
All right, so when that comes back up, we know that demolition is sometimes necessary, and so really have been working to improve the way we do demolition in the city. This has looked like a ongoing partnership between the city, SLDC, and the land bank, and partners like EPA, Missouri Department of Natural Resources, even Conservation Department. And what we've done is redone our city's demolition handbook and building code ordinances that set the requirements for demolition. So things like making sure that we're thinking about the entire parcel when we do demo, and not leaving any remnant fencing or concrete pads or a garage in the backyard, and trying to improve or decrease, I should say, the risk of to public health from demolition. So we now require that all demolitions in the city use construction grade misting fans to keep potential lead dust down, so that we're on that slide. Yeah. A new initiative of the Stabilization, Maintenance, and Demo Working Group is this Healthy Demos Task Force, where we've changed these standards over the last couple of years, but really digging into how do we continue to improve practices of demolition and make sure we're not impacting public health. So that is an ongoing effort right now, and we'll be launching with recommendations at the beginning of next year. Another solution potentially to be employed is something called deconstruction, which is the strategic disassembly of buildings to maximize salvage reuse and reduce environmental and public health impacts. Deconstruction takes more people, more time, and more money, but has more benefits on the other end. So that's more jobs creation, that's less to our landfills, that's less emissions, and it can create a local market for our historic building materials to be reused. Next slide. We'll come back to that question in the chat there. But again, only about 7,000 of these properties have buildings, and we've got plenty more without that have their own condition issues. So we've started using that same demolition funding to improve our vacant lot conditions. So the pictures on the right are an example of a before and after next to a park in the Walnut Park neighborhood, where when we have these connected areas of vacant properties, we can go in and as I mentioned, remove overgrowth, fencing, concrete retaining walls, things that attract illegal dumping and also make it very difficult for the city to maintain. We're trying to get to a point where you can push a lawnmower across any property. And one of the efforts that kind of follows on that is a neighborhood lot maintenance program where we're subcontracting with neighborhood-based groups to maintain certain vacant and abandoned properties. We're also working with the University of Louisville and SLU to bring a new tool to St. Louis that was deployed in Louisville, which is a brownfields area benefits estimator, and tries to really look at what we can do to use brownfield resources and tools to improve site conditions on these properties, which are pretty much all of brownfield status. And then on the other end, trying to promote really neighborhood scale, block by block reuse of vacant properties. So promoting our land bank's mow to own and side lot purchase programs and helping people acquire vacant lots, and providing tools for how you might repurpose a vacant lot, something other than a building. What are the local resources for kind of alternative reuse of open space? Next slide. And because I'm housed at St. Louis Development Corporation, and this is a new framework that's coming out, wanted to point out the ties between this work and the city's equitable economic development framework, which will hopefully be increasing as we move forward here. And one of the things that stands out on this one is a real place-based approach to land assembly and reuse. And I believe the framework also comes with a pretty collaborative effort. It doesn't say that the city will do this or SLDC will do this. It really calls on us as a region to tackle these topic areas and these specific places to really focus growth of jobs and equitable development around our commercial corridors and our business hubs. And I'm going to go ahead and skip the list on the right and roll back to Cindy here.
We're back to Bob. All righty.
Oh, Bob, sorry, Bob, thanks.
I was sitting in the wings, smoking a cigarette, having a drink, and Laura didn't say my name, so I'm a little slow on the draw here. Thanks, Laura. Of crucial importance in the reduction of vacancy is, well, redeveloping and renovating property so that it's put back to good use to attract residents and customers, remove blight from our neighborhoods, and increase the value of property on the tax rolls. Partly to that end, the stlvacancy.com website has a page with links to a number of resources and tools that are growing that everyone can address for ideas, techniques, and methods for reinvestment, ranging from simply from reporting problem properties to interim land use solutions like gardening and farming as a big deal, to, of course, fixing up and redeveloping properties themselves. Moreover, a collaboration with the North Newstead Association and the Tower Grove Neighborhoods CDC, we're hosting a series of landlord and rehabber training sessions aimed at people and companies wanting to make those kinds of investments. We're trying to increase the capacity of St. Louisans to reinvest in vacant or underused real estate in the urban core. The latest training session was, in fact, last night on the topic of nuisance abatement and evictions. Next slide, there we go. One of our great success stories, the beginnings of which predate the collaborative from a resident-driven petition process, is the voter-approved and now being implemented Prop NS, Neighborhood Stabilization Program. This has given city government the resources to stabilize a number of buildings in our land bank, the Land Reutilization Authority, in order to reduce deterioration of otherwise sound structures, thus preserving them for eventual renovation and reuse, and of course, preserving some of the heritage and architecture of our city. Now, remember, one of our goals is to reduce the number of demolitions in the city. Next slide. After decades of discriminatory housing policies, a coalition of the City of St. Louis, the St. Louis Development Corporation, a number of nonprofits, and various banks around the region, all with the support of the Vacancy Collaborative, have launched the Gateway Neighborhood Fund. This will provide loans to qualified home buyers to purchase and improve homes in neighborhoods that have depressed home values where, as I think we're all aware, the officially appraised values of the properties are less than the loan value. The GNF loans are intended to fill this gap by enabling up to $75,000 per mortgage loan over the appraised value in order to enable new homeowners to purchase and renovate those homes and bring their values up to where they should be. Pretty exciting program there. And the collaborative also devotes substantial time and effort in conjunction with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri and with many donated hours to reform the tax foreclosure procedures in the city. A chief goal is to get foreclosed properties into auction sooner so that they can be returned to private taxable uses more quickly, rather than remain as blights on our neighborhoods for extended periods. So there's much going on within the collaborative and with our partners to increase interest in reoccupying vacant real estate. Now let's move to the topic of neighborhoods and displacement by hearing again from Sunday Whiteside. Sunday. Silence.
I think you're on mute, Sunday.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Bob. And as you stated previously, tax foreclosure. Let me just say, I apologize for my dog barking in the background. Please forgive that sound. He does it every time I'm on Zoom. Other than that, it's peaceful and quiet. No, I'm just kidding. But tax foreclosure reform is needed, but tax foreclosure for homeowner occupied properties is not only devastating to the homeowner, but it is also devastating for the neighborhoods. Two of our most recent initiatives to prevent displacement and vacancy are the establishment of a real estate property tax assistance fund and a home repair network and fund. Peter Hoffman, co-chair of our vacancy prevention working group, wrote an op-ed featured in Post-Dispatch describing how property tax assistance funds are an easy gap for philanthropy to fill. The Property Tax Assistance Fund would leverage philanthropic dollars to produce a return on investment that would benefit the entire community. SLACO is working with the Vacancy Prevention Working Group to establish a home repair network that would serve as an umbrella, a collaborative for all stakeholders involved in the home repair ecosystem, such as home repair service providers, contractors, funders, social workers, and more. Tax assistance programs and home repair programs help fill local budgets. They prevent an increase in vacant property. They stabilize neighborhoods and protect homeowners facing economic hardship. They are an investment in our shared long-term prosperity. On our website at stlvacancy.com, we have a community organizations map that provides a wealth of information on neighborhood organizations and entities, their legal boundaries, contact information, the leadership contact information, and their meeting dates and times. So please, if you're ever roaming the internet, check out that community organizations map. It is a useful tool to someone that is new to St. Louis. The EPA's Building Blocks for Sustainable Communities is a program that provides targeted technical assistance on using tools that are designed to help neighborhoods achieve their desired development goals, improve the quality of life of the neighborhood, and become more economically and environmentally sustainable. They are currently working with the West End neighborhood to stimulate a discussion on solutions about growth and development and on ways to strengthen their local capacity to implement sustainable approaches to address vacancy in their neighborhood. Another effort that is a great initiative for our organization is our Community Land Trust initiative and development. Community land trusts are a national best practice for increasing community ownership and resident power in land use decisions. Our region has a few existing land trusts, including 24-1 Beyond Housing, who does an incredible job working with the 24 municipalities that are part of the Normandy School District, which is in North County. But Gateway Greening has a land trust focused on preserving community gardens specifically. And we have several land trusts in Missouri focused on rural areas like the Open Space Council. Several efforts are underway to develop successful equitable community land trusts that can facilitate community-driven vacant property reuse for the city of St. Louis. And last but not least is our Neighborhood Vacancy Initiative. This is run out of the Legal Services of Eastern Missouri office, and the manager for that program is, again, Peter Hoffman, chair of our Vacancy Prevention Working Group. The Neighborhood Vacancy Initiative assists residents and community organizations to address legal issues on vacant, abandoned, and blighted properties in the city of St. Louis. They provide services for vacancy prevention to help families protect generational wealth through transfer on death, or what we call beneficiary deeds, and simple estate planning. They provide title clearance services to resolve land title problems that prevent property owners from accessing financing to do home repairs or do anything with the equity that's in their home existing. They also assist nonprofit developers to clear title for projects dedicated to affordable housing. They also handle problem property litigation on behalf of nonprofit community groups to compel absentee owners of vacant rundown properties to either sell, repair, or face losing control of their property to qualified third parties so that repairs can be made. That pretty much summarizes all of the work that we do as a collaborative and the different programs and initiatives that we are behind and pushing. So I want to thank you and ask that you, if you want to learn more about us, please visit our website at www.stlvacancy.com. Consider joining a working group. Invest in or advocate for the solutions identified in our work plan. Donate. Donate to support the Vacancy Collaborative. And by all means, take the pledge. By taking the pledge, you're showing support for the diverse community movement that is working to address vacancy, improve our communities, and build a shared vision for the future. Thank you for your time this morning. We are ready for questions and discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. Obviously, that's a lot of information to kind of put out there, and I know you guys are just scratching the surface. So thank you for all of the work that you guys are doing. I have been involved in a couple of the working groups myself, and it's always amazing to see how far we can get as a collaborative. So definitely trying to keep that momentum going. I'm going to start off with just a couple of questions that we have that we kind of thought of ahead of time to try and just prime the pump for some questions that other people might have that are listening to this session. So specifically, we're on a webinar with ULI, and many of the people on this call may not have a whole lot of interaction or kind of have heard of the Vacancy Collaborative, but may not know how just to get involved. And you mentioned a few different ways that that's possible, but I was wondering if any of you all might have some suggestions about, a particular working group or a particular way that the ULI community and the development community in particular might be able to help the Vacancy Collaborative.
I know I can jump in on that one a little bit. I mentioned early in my talk, we're looking for people with skills. And to me, the Urban Land Institute membership is filled with skills, a wide range of skills that it takes to deal with, well, property development, real estate development, broadly speaking, but more directly to urban properties, some of which are challenged in many ways with land assembly, with some hazardous materials, with deteriorated buildings and so forth. So getting involved with certainly the one that I'm on the advisory committee, but I'm also a participant in the reinvestment and reuse working group, given my background. And I'd love to have more ULI members, those in finance, those in development, those in contracting, even in skilled trades, all kinds of things like that. That we could use that expertise to, how do we address these problems? What skills do we need to develop in the real estate industry? By the way, political skills as well, to work through all of those kinds of issues at the local and the state level. So legal help all over the place. We get a lot of help out of legal services and a number of other lawyers. But the more we get, the more diverse our opinions can be, the more powerful our solutions can be as well. Thanks, Cecilia.
Awesome. We also had a follow-up question from one of the discussion points, Laura, while you were talking about the demolition and the stuff that's going on around that. Lisa asked if you alert or have any mechanisms to alert neighbors to demolitions prior to the date of the demolition so that they can close their windows and remove the risks of some of the asthma and sort of health risks that are also associated with demolition.
Yeah, the changes that were made really internally in the city in 2018 when we started requiring misting fans didn't include any kind of notification of neighbors. I would say the only things we've been able to accomplish on that are these demolition coming soon stickers that go up on a building when it's been slated for demo. But because we're so backlogged, it can be 6 months from the time that sticker goes up till the building comes down. So we know that that's not good enough. And then the demo tracker. So that was one of the really key reasons why this Healthy Demos Task Force was birthed out of the Stabilization Maintenance Demo Working Group and in coordination with the city's health department. Because the question was, A, how do we use this health department to continuously monitor potential health impacts of demolition and make sure that we're not exacerbating racial health disparities like asthma and lead poisoning. But then secondly, how do we improve the way that we're communicating with residents what the risks are and when demolitions are happening? So one of the key things that's already come out of that task force that the building division is already working on in IT is a way for contractors to check in every time they're at a building. And then we can disperse notifications within a certain radius around. So really looking forward to figuring out how we deploy that in 2021 and really do need help on that. We tried door hangers, for example, but just the manpower it takes to go put door hangers around every single one of these buildings wasn't sustainable. So this is all, yeah, we have work to do.
Certainly better than it was, you know, not that long ago. So good to hear that that's moving in the right direction. Another question from Casey, which kind of has two parts. So I'll go with the first one first. How do you all prioritize your work when there's so much to do in the Vacancy Collaborative around vacancy and its sort of ancillary topics as well?
I wonder if we can't put Tara on the spot for that question, our Vacancy Collaborative Coordinator.
Thanks, Laura. I mean, I'm curious what everyone else thinks too, but yeah, prioritizing the work is a challenge, right? I mean, Laura talked about decades of disinvestment and challenges of systemic racism getting us to this point. So getting out is not going to be easy. But I think just recognizing that we have these really big goals and they are audacious and like will take a lot of time, but what can we do now to build those relationships and kind of those dual parallel tracks of building relationships and taking time to work through, you know, trust and breaking down silos, you know, within the city, between city and community, across partners, but then at the same time, like working on getting things done. And so that's where I think the work plan is really important in terms of saying, okay, what can we do in the next year and a half to really push us towards these goals? So, you know,
I'll just add thank you, that the work plan was shopped kind of through all of the working groups and back to the advisory committee and really went through this iterative process to get prioritized to where it's at from all the members.
And I agree. And I think not only shopping it through the working groups, but actually also through a lot of the city departments, through SLDC, the building division. So we had lots of conversations with all of our stakeholders to help us get a vision of the priorities with the understanding that our foundation is our guiding principles, the transparency, the equitable development, the inclusion and engagement of residents were critical guiding principles that helped us as well. But it really stemmed from the working group's input and shopped to all city departments and stakeholders.
So building off of that question a little bit, obviously this has been in the works for a little while now, and I think the first iteration of the working plan is, I think maybe we're halfway in or just under a year in or so. So with that said, are there any things about the working plan or just in general the work that the Vacancy Collaborative is working on that presents large stumbling blocks or is kind of like the hardest thing that you guys have had to overcome so far and kind of you see ahead? Sunday, you unmuted, so do you want to?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. One of the critical pieces in the juncture that we're at is the financial sustainability of the effort, where we have created such a great synergy because we have people that are at the table that are the masters of their skill working on some of the initiatives. But fundamentally, we need help in the financial sustainability of this effort to keep our coordinator in place, to keep our staff in place. We have 3 staff that support this effort. And we, to me, that could be a potential stumbling block to this effort that we really need all hands on deck focus on to bring us through this. But fundamentally, that's it. A better sustainability, financial sustainability model is what we really are seeking.
And I just want to emphasize what Sunday said, because people don't prioritize community building and relationship building and the amount of time it takes to just continuously facilitate conversations to get at collective impact. So that really is a huge challenge. Instead of being very metric driven, this isn't an issue that we can check a box and say success 6 months from now, right? So it's an ongoing situation that needs sustained support.
And I think that, were you done, Laura? I'm sorry.
No, I just thought Bob wanted to chime in. No, go ahead.
Oh,
Well, yeah, quickly, building on both of those thoughts, I don't know if it's an obstacle yet, but it's a lot of work, and that's staying in communication with our political leaders, particularly the elected ones. I think we've done a yeoman's effort along those lines. We're going to have to keep doing that so that they are aware of what we're doing and will help lead the agencies and give them the resources to be able to actually implement a lot of this. So a huge effort needs to continue in communicating with our aldermen, with our state representatives, with the mayor's office, with the county offices that have a lot of say over the over property assessments and taxes and so forth. So those are big efforts that need to go on and really help support the working groups, sort of giving them the framework.
and I wanted to piggyback off of what Laura again said. And it's a stumbling block now, but that communication with the neighborhoods and communities, which has to be continuous. It has to be community engagement, not community outreach, where it's a one day you drop into a neighborhood and do a survey and get input. And I wanted to share that when we first started off and looking at the models of this collaborative, we didn't have working groups. People didn't want subcommittees. We had it specifically laid out the way Asakura Robinson's land bank assessment wanted it, where you had an inner group of city departments working and then an advisory committee, those 2 entities only working together to create this collaborative. But being SLACO and being neighborhood resident driven, I'm at the table and I'm like, no, we've got to have a way to have communication and include neighborhood residents throughout this entire process. So we devised the working groups and the priority issues and create the working groups so that we can have this be an inclusive effort, unlike other initiatives and task force that exist in the St. Louis community, where neighborhood residents are informed just to get feedback or occasionally participate in something. We wanted this to have resident voices included throughout the process. It's a hurdle because we have to finance it, and it takes the communication that Laura again is speaking of. Sorry.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys are well on your way to tackling any of those hurdles or speed bumps, I guess, along the way. We had a question from Patricia. She lives in an inner ring municipality that has challenges with title clearances and problem property litigation of vacant properties. Is there a way that other municipalities can reach out to the Vacancy Collaborative to learn about how they're reducing vacant buildings, and especially around the data analysis? Laura G, you're nodding your head.
Sure. Yeah. And not only that, you know, we'd love to talk and share ideas, but I feel like over the last several years, we've really kind of settled into a network of other cities dealing with this challenge as well, that maybe we could connect to. One great example of that is something called the Strategic Code Enforcement Management Academy, SCHEMA, which we've participated in as a group for the last 2 years. And that brings cities of all sizes together to really talk about how we use these tools strategically and equitably, code enforcement specifically. So just saying there's hopefully other things we could tap you into as well. So, sure.
Awesome. And then we had a question from Dale, and he's talking specifically around the NGA site. He said that the area around the NGA appears to be a significant amount of the vacant properties in the city, both by numbers and of parcels and size. Is there anything specific that's happening within that area, or you know, that's specifically targeting the NGA?
There's someone on here who I'd love to call on to answer that, but most of those properties are owned by an entity called Northside Regeneration, who you may also know as Paul McKee. And we don't want to really go down that rabbit hole, but when I talked about how we have a challenge when we have privately owned vacant properties, it's exactly what you're looking at when you look around the NGA site, is a large compilation of privately held abandoned properties, which is, you know, means that that's a lot of power in that person's hand to kind of have a say in the future of that space. So it's a really great example of the challenge of disparate ownership and some past decisions of the city and how we got to kind of work against some of that now. I'll leave it at that in case anyone wants to.
All right. Well, I'm going to kind of go back to a couple of the other questions. Where would you like to see action or movement in general? You know, not just around the NGA, but, you know, you talked a lot about how the highest concentration of vacant properties really is north of Del Mar. Is there anything in particular that you would like to see action or movement around? Obviously, there's a lot of different moving pieces, but is there sort of one that you imagine would have a very large impact that would make you all feel excited about?
For me, it's the area that you're in, Cecilia, the planning piece, the dedication and allocation of funding to help neighborhood residents work with experts in planning, especially urban planning, to help us design plans and a vision. And I think sometimes that's what we lose, is giving everyone a vision that produces hope and for the future of what our communities can look like. And a plan goes a long way to helping us be inspired with a vision.
Sure, we all have many answers and different answers. The one that's top of my mind lately is really building repair and renovation, and not just of vacant buildings, but increasing access to home repair, and improving our code enforcement and support policies so that we're not ending up with vacant and abandoned properties. And then on the other end, we really need more financing tools so that we can invest in rehabilitating properties that have appraisal gaps and are difficult to get funding for. It's my pick too. Bob, what are yours?
Well, it's a tough question. I mean, in one sense, success, these kinds of things typically come on building on strengths. So you can envision theoretically that movements toward redevelopment. Laura just mentioned a lot of ways to make sure our buildings don't fall down and people are living in good housing, but we would like to fill in the spaces in between, increase the amount of buying power and economic development potential in the area. So building on strengths, and what does that mean? Well, that's part of the planning process to identify where we've got strengths. I think of a neighborhood as an example, like the West End, that is pretty well organized. It's attached to the Delmar Loop. And so there's some strength to its immediate south. Can we move that further north, which then we can move further north? Being sort of realistic about it, maybe a little bit on the controversial side, it's hard to go into the middle of that donut hole and say, wow, look at all the empty land or available land we could do some stuff with, when there's really nothing to build on from a market perspective. Now, that said, something of great scale that could be financed and occupied with a lot of land would be awesome, but that's very, very expensive and risky. So it's identifying those places where we can build upon, think long-term, but also what can we get done in the short term, building on where we've already seen some strengths. Downtown is one, certainly the near northwest side should be one. But there are opportunities along the I-70 corridor as well, where we've got some economic strengths. Let's maybe build on those. But I would push that back, having said that, back to the planners, the planning department, to help identify what are those assets that we've got as a community or neighborhoods or corridors, and see where we can start to maybe look like we've got some places to really start and start to attract private investment.
Thanks. I also got kind of a follow-up question to one of the things that Laura was talking about in her presentation, I think, around the Prop NS, as well as the, I think some people would call it the Green Lining Fund, but I think it's officially called the Gateway Neighborhood Fund. So I know you kind of touched on it in your presentation, but maybe we can talk about Prop NS first. I think that that fund is supposed to be kind of getting off the ground soon. Is there a status update on that, or are we kind of working towards
NS has launched. It is live. You can go online if you just Google Prop NS St. Louis. The St. Louis-mo.gov site, the city website, has a page for it where anyone who owns property or lives in the city, basically if you pay taxes here, you can nominate a property to be stabilized. Only properties that are already owned by the land bank, we have the authority to do that, but you can nominate a property. It goes to a 7-person review committee, which a pretty good group of folks, I think a couple are on this call. And if approved, we can invest up to $30,000 in a single family home and up to $50,000 in a multifamily home to really weatherize, stabilize, keep that building from kind of demolishing itself over time. And the hope is that we're both keeping the buildings from needing to be demolished, but also helping get one step closer to somebody being able to get the funding necessary to bring that property back into an occupiable state. We know 30 to 50,000 is not enough. So it really is just a step for someone else to really pick it up from there. And then as part of that online process, nomination process, you can also see, kind of track which buildings have been nominated, where they are in the process. Did we approve them? Are they getting funding? And after the work is done, they are back up for bid on the LRA as an LRA property with no increase to the minimum bid. So that's a pretty exciting program.
Awesome. Yeah. And you know, there are a few that are in the pipeline. So good to hear that's getting off the ground. With the Green Lining Fund, I think some people are referring to it as that, but I think it's being called the Gateway Neighborhood Fund, the mortgage product that you all were talking about. Is that launched? Is that kind of ready for people to start applying for it and all of that? I see nodding, yes.
Yes, it is launched, and it's in partnership with Justine Peterson. So Randon Click, I believe, is the contact to make, and he's already offered training to right now real estate agents and other groups on how to access and utilize and prepare a homeowner for that program. And behind the scenes, we are communicating with Sean Thomas, the manager of Proposition NS, in order to create a very clear pathway on using Prop NS and the Gateway Neighborhood Fund together.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't even put those two together, so I'm glad to hear that's being linked. Some other questions around contractors and assembling a list of contractors. I think some of the, and I've heard this before, there's a lot of difficulty in finding contractors to do work in certain areas of the city, or just in general, getting contractors that are willing to do both home repair work as well as sort of large contract work. Is the Vacancy Collaborative able to assemble a list of contractors that are willing to work in North City around a lot of vacant properties? And then building off of that, we had another question around just a difficulty in finding contractors. Is there anything in discussions right now about either developing a pipeline of contractors or getting the resources they need in order to develop that sort of industry?
Yes, we are very diligently looking for funding and just assembling all of the groups related to home repair, not just to home repair assistance programs, but to home repair for residents. I live in the Walnut Park East neighborhood, and sometimes it is very difficult to find a contractor to come in my area to repair something, you know, so we are working towards, that's the reason, the rationale behind the home repair network, because we recognize there is no umbrella or group that is listing all of the contractors, all of the financial institutions that will help you with financing your home repair, and all of the assistance programs. The Vacancy Prevention Committee created a vacancy prevention resource guide that lists the funders and the home repair service providers. But the next step, which they recognize, and which is something that this home repair network would try to accomplish, is assembling all of the contractors and vetting them, and creating somewhat like an Angie's List, where neighborhood residents that you know, that you can recognize and identify with, give reviews on these contractors.
Awesome. Well, I think we've run out of time. So I know there's a lot of other questions out there. I think we can probably try and get those addressed at a later time individually as needed. But I want to thank all of you guys for your time, and I appreciate being able to be a part of this. I'm really excited about what you all are doing and happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
I would just echo that and say, this is a ton of work. I mean, Bob, I think you called it just that. I think we all are engaged in it in some way, you know, in this field. And I think we can all appreciate maybe how much you guys have on your plates. And I really, my first gut response is again to say thank you for all that you're doing. And I know you're also here on behalf of a lot of other volunteers and all the working groups, and you're sort of standing up in sort of place of them too. It's just really inspiring and amazing. And I hope that people who have been listening in today do take the opportunity to, at the very least, get more informed, so that when you're out in the community talking and thinking about this stuff, you're sharing the good news. This is a real bright spot, I think, for our region. And the fact that you're doing major collaborative work during a pandemic, it's got to make it harder. So hats off to all of you. I would just also offer a quick advertisement for our next ULI flagship program of the year is Emerging Trends. It's on December 10th. And the one word I will leave you with is reinvention. We're going to try to make this a very different and modern presentation. So I hope that it ends the year for ULI on a programming note in an inspiring way too. But I'm thrilled that we finally made the stars align to bring this great team of folks from the Vacancy Collaborative here today. And thanks to Cecilia for moderating and holding down the fort at the city. It looks like she's at her office. I don't know, is that yes? So like civil servant going at it. Thank you. Okay, everybody, have a super rest of the week, and thanks for joining today.